You guys, Erin here, back with another moon update for you. And we certainly have a very, very powerful new moon coming up here in the sign of Taurus. This is taking place on Friday, May 19th at 8:53 a.m. Pacific time. Now, as with any new moon, this is a time for new beginnings. This is a time to manifest growth that is related to this lovely sign of Taurus. But there's so much more to this. This is so powerful because we've got so many other things going through the sign of Taurus. And I'll explain to you that when I pull up the chart. But be thinking about this. This is especially when we've got this many celestial bodies in one zodiac sign. And if I really like working with the whole sign house system when we're working with our moon transits, to see which house in your natal chart the sign of Taurus rules could be extremely helpful to manifest with this, new moon, new beginnings. And what I'm talking about here is, I've mentioned this before. If you've been watching my recordings for a while, I apologize if this is, kind of getting a little repetitive. But what I'm talking about are the houses, the things that look like a slice of pie in your natal chart. You'd want to look to see look for the symbol for the sign of Taurus and which house it lands in your natal chart. If you're using Placidus, this new moon takes place at 28 degrees and 25 minutes, I think. So you need to see specifically where 28 degrees, 25 minutes comes through in your own natal chart. It could be coming through your house of career, your house of self. If you're a Taurus rising, could be coming through your house of money, could be coming through your house of transformation, your house of home, your house of relationships, your house of communication. There's all these different areas of your life that this new moon could be coming through. And when we know how to work with that, then we know, okay, so we want to manifest new beginnings that have to do with the sign of Taurus. And I will break down the details of this sign of Taurus for you in just a minute here. But this one in particular is really good, especially if you're a beginner and you want to start figuring this stuff out. And then you'd say, okay, so I want to manifest new Taurus beginnings, but they land in the area of my life that has to do with my career, or it lands in the area of my life that has to do with transformation, or it lands in the area of my life that has to do with my physical health or my mental health. That's, again, why it's so good to get familiar with your natal chart. And if you want to schedule a reading with me, just schedule straight through my website, erinwageastrology.com. When you get a reading with me, you get the full video recording. We pull up the chart. We go through all the houses. So you can always go back and see that recording to see which area of your life is being affected by any of the celestial transits. Okay, so there's that. All right, let's start breaking down the sign of Taurus. So Taurus is what we call the fixed earth sign. And this is what makes this energy so great, because when I say fixed, what I'm talking about is stability. Okay. All the signs are either fixed, cardinal, or mutable. The mutable signs are great because they're adaptable and they can adapt into new situations. Cardinal signs are great for projecting forward, but the fixed signs are about stability. Okay. And especially because this is in the element of earth. All the earth signs tend to come with, even the mutable earth sign, Virgo, tends to be a little more stable than some of the other signs. Okay. Because it's about earth. It's about taking care of our earthly, mundane responsibilities. Not only that, but the sign of Taurus is ruled by Venus, okay? Venus being the influencer of love, all right? The sign of Taurus has a lot to do with sensuality, tends to give off a very warm, I would say this, it's like my favorite sign to give a good old bear hug to, or like Moon in Taurus or Venus in Taurus, one of those really good placements, because it's like this, just this soft, warm, sort of huggy feeling that we get from the sign of Taurus. Now, also that energy being ruled by Venus has a lot to do with money, okay? Money and material possessions and the value that we hold over those things, okay? Like some of you know that I love gemstones, right? That's something that I really hold a lot of value for my gemstones. It's something when I work hard to obtain the financial gain to be able to purchase gemstones. And then when I get the gemstones, I hold them in such high value. I love them so much. Of course, I love them when they're gifts as well. But when I know I worked hard to obtain them, that's, a really strong value system. That sign of Taurus has a lot to do with this, okay? You might notice a lot of people, certainly not everybody, but a lot of people who have their sun in Taurus, they like things. They like to buy things. They like to, I'll just say, in a relationship for a very long time with a Taurus, and he was always buying things. And this was long before I was an astrologer. And I always wondered, like, what the heck is up with this, with the motorbike and the tractor, and then the second motorbike and the truck and the car, and always wanting to purchase things and possess them. Okay, that's very much this sign of Taurus. Okay, now also this sign of Taurus, this is something to be a little mindful of. When I say it likes to consume, of course, I'm talking about buying things, but also likes to consume as in eating, okay? It likes to put things in their mouth. A lot of times people, when they have their, because the moon rules our emotions, and a lot of time when somebody is born with their moon in Taurus, they can have a tendency to emotionally eat, okay? That's something to just be mindful of if you got your moon in Taurus, or even when the moon is transiting through the sign of Taurus. But I'll get a little further into that about the food part of this transit, because there's actually something really nice going on with it. Okay, so, that's, if you've got a lot of Taurus energy in your natal chart, you might just want to be a little bit mindful about that, because it's the fixed earth sign that can definitely hold weight. But it's also the sign, statistically speaking here, that tends to have the greatest longevity. Aries and Leo too, but the sign of Taurus, because Aries, even though it's the cardinal fire sign with all his energy and tends to get a lot of exercise and that sort of thing, it doesn't hold the energy in because it's cardinal, and it kind of, the energy goes flying out to the top of the head. The sign of Taurus and the sign of Leo being fixed, they don't overexert themselves. They tend to hold the energy and tends to be really strong energy. Okay, now also the sign of Taurus, well, really the motto for the sign of Taurus is I possess. Okay, like again, as I was talking about, this is a sign that holds value over things. And please don't get me wrong, if you're a Taurus and you're thinking, well, gee, I don't have a thing with material possessions, that sort of thing, it's because there's so much more to the natal chart. Maybe you got Neptune on your sun or something that just trips things up a little bit. A lot of this depends on the rest of your natal chart, but the sign of Taurus in and of itself has a lot to do with possessing things, material possessions, not necessarily being possessed. Of course, that can kind of come and tie into things here, but really I'm talking about owning things. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you guys. Okay, let's see here. What else about this sign of Taurus? It's represented by the bull. Okay, the bull that is stubborn and doesn't want to budge. Okay, yes, the sign of Taurus can definitely have some stubbornness that comes through. All the fixed signs can, but again, that's part of that is because it's holding the energy in. And in fact, like planting things like potatoes or any sort of roots, especially when it's a waning moon going through the sign of Taurus, it's a really good time to be planting things that are, in fact, I would even say maybe the day before this new moon, so the 18th, depending on where you live, it might be too hot for some of these root plants, but potatoes might get a little too hot depending on where you're living. But carrots, things that grow into radishes, that sort of thing, really good time to plant those earth root vegetables because they hold the energy in with this sign of Taurus. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Also, like I said, the sign of Taurus, it's the earth sign. It's very grounded. Okay, it's very stable. And if you're somebody who doesn't have any earth in your natal chart, it's a really good idea to be consuming things like root vegetables, potatoes and carrots and radishes, that sort of thing, to help you stay grounded. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chart. And by the way, let me mention this real quick in case I lose anybody. I will always be talking about, when I get to the end of this recording, I will be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Taurus. And I'll be talking about these parts of our body become more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Taurus. And especially when we get all this Taurus energy coming through, I'll be talking about certain parts of the body and how to work with those parts of our body. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth. I'm going to show you guys a certain book that is really good if you're getting into that sort of thing. Okay, so there's that. I'll also be talking about gemstones that resonate well with this sign of Taurus, not only just with this sign of Taurus, but also just with everything that's going on in the sky. Okay, so what we're looking at here is I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. And this is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. And this is based on my location. And in case, you're a new person here, let me explain something. Okay, so these right here, these are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Like here's the sun, here's the moon, here's Uranus, here's Mercury, here's the North Node, here's Jupiter. This right here is the sign of Taurus. Okay, the symbol for the sign of Taurus. If you're on a phone, it might be a little difficult to see. There's a slightly bigger glyph for that sign of Taurus right here where I'm circling. Now, look how much we've got going to the sign of Taurus. But if you live in a different, I live in Santa Cruz, California. This is based on my location. And I know I've got some listeners over in the UK, all places all over the world. And so if you're really new to this and you take the time to pull this chart up where you live, it's going to look different. It's still the same thing, really. Like here's the sun at 28 degrees Taurus and 25 minutes. Here's the moon at 28 degrees, 25 minutes Taurus. They're coming through this little slice of pie, the 11th house. That house where they are in this circle, that's based on my location. They're, no matter where you are in the world, they're going to be at 28 degrees and 25 minutes Taurus. But let's see, if you live over in the UK, they're going to be over here, something like that. Or even if you're over in, the East Coast or something, they'll be over here, but they'll still be in the sign of Taurus. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I've actually gotten a couple people asking questions about that and asking for me to clarify on that. And I'm not sure how else much more in depth I could go with that. It's just to understand that these guys, this takes place, this new moon takes place at 8:53 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, so what that means is the sun always rises right here. Okay, this is where the sun rises every single day. And it rises, let's see, probably around 6 o'clock in the morning in my location now. So as the hours go by 8:53, the sun has moved up to here. Okay, but if you are, let's say, living in New York or again, like the East Coast, then this new moon would be at 11:53 a.m. And so it's going to be like up here. More than likely, it'll probably land up here in the 9th house. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everybody. But more importantly, we don't necessarily need to focus on that. I mean, it's important if you're trying to really finely tune when to launch something or when to plant something or that sort of thing. It really does, it makes a difference knowing where the sun is in the sky, knowing where everything is in the sky. But if we're just working with trying to manifest new beginnings that have to do with this sign of Taurus, what matters most is that the sun and the moon are in the same spot at 28 degrees, 25 minutes Taurus. Okay. So, and that's what happens anytime we have a new moon. It means the sun and the moon are coming together and then the exact same spot at the exact same time. And that's what makes a new moon. The sun is considered the father in Western astrology. The moon is considered the mother, and they're coming together to create this energetic baby. Okay. And that baby grows, the energetic baby grows over the next 6 months till we have a full moon in the sign of Taurus. That's the growth cycle. Okay. This is like the seed that is still in the soil when we have a new moon. Just think about the energetic seed that's in the soil. And, as this Taurus energy grows over these next 6 months, it'll grow. That's where our energetic influence goes, where we're setting our intentions for. Over these 6 months, that seed grows and develops, and 6 months from now, it'll be the peak of that growth cycle. So that's why I always pull out my journal when we're having a new moon. Of course, full moons are super powerful. I mean, they're incredibly powerful, especially energetically. But new moons are my favorite because it's the beginning of the growth cycle. So we pull out our journal and write down, okay, how do I want to grow in ways that are related to this sign of Taurus? Well, I'd like to become more stable. I'd like to manifest more financial abundance. I'd like to manifest a new car. I'd like to manifest a strong value system. Or I'd like to manifest healthy, like eating styles, or not styles, but healthy ways to eat. Again, this sign of Taurus has a lot to do with consuming. Okay, so just be thinking about that. All right, now 28 degrees, this actually puts us in something called the third decan of this Taurus energy, what actually gives it a little twist of Capricorn energy as well, which Capricorn kind of pushes it a little forward. It gives it a little bit more projection to move forward. Capricorn is the cardinal Earth sign, so there's a little bit more force that can come through when we're talking about the last 10 degrees of this sign of Taurus. So keep that in mind as well. Now, And going back to these houses that I'm talking about, what I'm looking at here is I work with a software called Time Passages, which personally I love. Not everybody loves this software. I have worked with some other astrologers who are like, I get confused looking at your software because it looks slightly different than the one I'm using. That's totally normal. If you're used to using something different, that's perfectly okay, but it should look recognizably similar. Okay. So when you pull up your own natal chart, which you could get that calculated for free anywhere, as long as you know your birth date, your approximate birth time. Not everybody knows their exact birth time, but at least within hopefully a couple hours, you know that, and your location. Just go to the internet, do a search for a free natal chart, calculation, and it will calculate this for me. Again, I'm working with Western astrology. Vedic astrology is great too. I have nothing against it. That's just kind of a different form of working with things, but we're working with Western astrology here, to be clear. So you'd pull up something that looks similar to this, okay? Just, it would be a circle and you would see all these right here are the symbols or glyphs, okay? For the zodiac signs, like here's Taurus, here's Gemini, here's Cancer, here's Leo. And in your natal chart, you should see any one of these houses, look for the symbol. Kind of looks like the bull's head, okay? Just look for that. And if you're using a Placidus house system, just keep in mind, you're going to want to see exactly where 28 degrees and 25 minutes comes through your own natal chart. Again, if you want clarity on this, you don't even necessarily, I do recommend, if it's your first time getting a reading with me, I do recommend at least getting the 1 hour session. So we've got time to at least go through the whole chart. I mostly recommend the 90-minute reading. If you've never had a reading with me, I do recommend the 90-minute reading, but even a half an hour reading, if you just cannot afford, the 1 hour or the 90-minute session, even if you specifically just want to know your houses in your natal chart, we could do that in a half hour. Okay. Okay, so, and the houses, you guys don't know what the houses are. If you're new to this, okay, very quickly here, because again, this is so important for this. It's important for any new moon, but it's when we have this many celestial bodies in one zodiac sign, it's like full force, okay? So if it lands right here, this is always going to be the first house, always. This is where the first house lands, okay? So if it's right here, then that's your first house. Taurus is coming through your first house, which is the house of self. Okay, if it's coming through this slice of pie, if you see the little symbol for Taurus in the second house, that's the house of money, material possessions, and values. Okay, if it comes through your third house, that's the house of communication, sharing information, can also have to do with little short journeys, little travels, and can also have to do with siblings. The fourth house, this is the house of home. Maybe the house that you grew up in, or the house you're living in now, or the house that you potentially would like to live in the future, can also have to do with either mother or father. Okay, now also this fifth house is the house of children and creativity. It doesn't necessarily have to be applied to children that your own children. It certainly can, but it can also have stuff to do with what you're creating for the world, like being an entrepreneur. If you're creating something to put it out in the world, obviously when we make babies, we are procreating. Okay, so but not everybody has children, so it's more just about what you're creating for the world. And this fifth house can also have to do with sexual pleasure. Okay, sixth house has to do with our physical health and also how we are being of service to the world. Okay, now, and keep in mind that sixth house can also sort of be related to ill health. So keep that in mind. Okay, seventh house, this is the house of relationships. Very much can apply to romantic relationships, but it certainly doesn't have to. Any kind of one-on-one relationship. It could even be multiple relationships, but just the one-on-one relationships. If you're somebody who takes clients or regular customers, or if you're a doctor and you take patients, they would fall into this seventh house for you. Okay, eighth house, this is the house of transformation. This eighth house can also have to do with sexual energy. This is more like the intensity that comes with sexual energy. It's kind of like this house of death and rebirth, can also have a lot to do with psychic capabilities. Ninth house is the house of higher learning and advanced knowledge, very philosophical house, can also have to do with long distance travels. If you say you've got Taurus, you see the symbol for Taurus coming through your ninth house, and you've been wanting to fly overseas and go see other parts of the world, now's the time to manifest that. Okay, 10th house is the house of career, public life, status, recognition. The 11th house, this is the house of associates and hopes and wishes. Has a lot to do with like who we're networking with, that sort of thing. And the 12th house, the house of karma, the house of self-undoing, a very, very mystical, spiritual house, can also have to do with psychic capabilities. Okay, so there's that. And again, if you're somebody who's been watching my recordings for a while and you already know this stuff, I apologize if it's too repetitive, but I just want everybody, you know, even the new people who are coming along, I want them to be able to learn this stuff for themselves. That's the whole point of me doing this. Okay, so again, new moon, new beginnings, sun and moon are right together in the same spot. But notice very quickly right here, we still have Uranus going through Taurus, okay? That's been going through Taurus basically since 2018. And will be going through Taurus, I believe, all the way till the end of 2025. Okay, so Uranus trips things up here a little bit, okay? Uranus is making things bringing a little berserker energy because, and this is considered a debilitated placement. And the reason I say that is because Uranus brings abrupt, revolutionary, and technological changes, okay? Uranus is electrical, this zappy, sort of spasmodic energy. And here I'm talking about the sign of Taurus is steady, okay? It's the stable energy. And that's why Uranus is debilitated in the sign of Taurus, because Taurus is like, what is going on? Getting electrocuted by this Uranus energy coming through. But the real positive energies that are coming from this that I'm seeing anyway, is we are seeing some very revolutionary changes that are going on with Earth. And of course, some of it is not good. Okay, well, this sign of Taurus can also have to do with agricultural systems. Any of the Earth signs can really. And look at the revolutionary changes we are seeing with our agricultural systems. Again, some of it is horrible. You know, personally, I don't want anything to do with pesticides and herbicides and all kinds of weird stuff being sprayed on the stuff that I'm about to eat. I also don't want things to be genetically modified. There's all kinds of weird things going on with our agricultural systems that I don't support at all. But there's always a positive side to think about this. There's something called electroculture that I just recently have really been getting into. Thank goodness I've got all these great friends that get to show me all this cool stuff. And if you're on Instagram, I highly recommend just doing a search for, do a hashtag search for electroculture, and you will find some very fascinating stuff. This is what I've been experimenting with, where you can take whatever you're growing, the plant, or even if it's a tree, I mean, whatever size it is you're going to have to be flexible with this, but you take a piece of wood, whether it be, I've been using little twigs. Okay. For some of you who don't know, I grow cannabis. I grow a lot of things. I have a big garden, but cannabis is my favorite thing to grow. I just have a natural knack for it. But I take a little stick, okay, a little twig that most of them have come from a little apricot tree that's been struggling in my front yard. So I take that and I take a piece of copper wire and wrap it around. So you want the copper wire to be going clockwise around the stick with a little antenna sticking up. So basically, you want to make sure that the copper wire is in the soil, touching the soil, but then, and wrap it around that twig and then poking up like a little antenna at the top of the twig. So you're basically giving you the plant and the soil extra sun energy, because copper is clearly very conductive. Okay. So that is totally Uranus and Taurus. And I love stuff like that. It's a little geeky, a little fun science stuff that I love. And that's the positive things I see coming from this. But also think about, again, the sign of Taurus is really the sign of money. Think about what's going on with our financial systems. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, it's really, really wild. Just inflation in and of itself. And then everything that happened with the cryptocurrencies just crashed. I personally feel and I could be wrong. I always admit I could be wrong about any of this. And personally, I don't really like making predictions per se, but when I see the tendency for it, I have to recognize it. I have to pay a little attention to it. And what I'm getting at here is Uranus technology going through the sign that rules money all the way till 2025, end of 2025. I personally think that the whole digital currency thing is going to blow up over these next couple of years. And unfortunately, I do think there's a strong tendency to be going towards a cashless society. But the people, the geniuses out there, all you people with these good old Aquarius energy coming through your chart, or, just whatever you got in your chart, some of these people just come up with these inventions, these genius ideas. I personally think somebody, and I think they're going to have a lot of Aquarius in their natal chart, is going to come up with a way to benefit from this, to where, the people of the world can actually benefit from this. Of course, there's going to be corruption and all kinds of awful things going on with our financial systems. However, I do think that there's always going to be, a positive and a negative. There's always, and maybe it's my Sagittarius rising, but I'm always trying to focus on the positive. Okay. How do I raise my vibration above this very challenging thing in this life? Okay. So that's something else to think about. And also, I don't want to forget to mention this. So where Wall Street is, clearly Wall Street's associated with money. There's a huge bull statue. Okay. Where do we think that symbolism is coming from? Very, very interesting, right? All right. So there's that. Now, also, this right here is Mercury, who is just, I think when I'm making this recording, I think Mercury's just went out of retrograde today. So that's nice. Mercury's out of retrograde, but going through the sign of Taurus. Now, this is very interesting because Mercury has so much to do with our mental function. Okay. Mercury is basically the one who is the ruler of the organization in our mind, but also keeping things organized so that we can communicate it. Okay. Mercury has so much to do with, again, our mental function, but also our communication skills. And personally, what I like about Mercury going through any of the earth signs really is that he slows down. Everybody's walking around with these super busy minds today, just being exposed to all the weird electromagnetic fields and just constantly in front of our devices. Mercury's probably on overdrive for all of us. In the sign of Taurus, it kind of slows Mercury down. Like Mercury's like, okay, let's relax, chill a little bit here. But Mercury's kind of close to Uranus, so that a little bit counteracts some of that. But overall, I'd still say I like the placement of Mercury in Taurus because it slows things down. Next, moving forward, this right here is the North Node, which we've talked so much about going to the sign of Taurus. Again, what I'm talking about with the agricultural systems and the financial systems, just really wild changes going on with those things. What was going on back in 2022, even the very beginning of 2023, is Uranus and the North Node were right next to each other in the sign of Taurus. So the North Node is what brings energy in. It's like the valve that brings celestial energy into Earth. And when it was right next to Uranus going through Taurus, it was like overdrive of this Uranus zapping the sign of Taurus. Now they're separated. I'd say there's still a connection there, but it's nice that they're separating. In fact, I would say going into next month, even just a couple weeks after this transit, that North Node is going to be working a little more independently, but then I have to catch myself here because basically, let me just leave it at this. This is the last new moon that we will be having in the sign of Taurus with the North Node in the sign of Taurus for 18 years. Okay. Now keep in mind that North Node is what brings celestial energy in. So it's feeding us this Taurus energy. Again, it's a little bit of a berserker. Like it would be so much more calm and mellow and stable if Uranus wasn't going through Taurus, but it is. And that's just part of our karma here. But just keep in mind that North Node bringing celestial energy in with the new moon in Taurus. It's a very, very powerful time to manifest new beginnings related to the sign of Taurus. Now, moving forward, Jupiter just moved into Taurus. Okay. Now there's wonderful things about this. There's always pros and cons to everything in astrology, every zodiac sign, every aspect, even the trines, which are wonderful aspects. There's some not so great things that come from that. There's always going to be pros and cons to everything in astrology. The wonderful thing about, Jupiter's the great benefic. Okay. Jupiter is said to bring luck, abundance, wisdom, philosophy, make things more grand, expand them. Okay. But Jupiter is also Thor in, Norse mythology, and Jupiter is also Zeus in Greek mythology. So there's a lot more we can really say about Jupiter. He can be aggressive for sure. Jupiter can be very aggressive. Jupiter rules our arteries, and also Jupiter rules fat. Okay. Which again, there's pros and cons to that. Just keep that in mind. But overall, I'd say Jupiter just kind of makes things a bigger deal sometimes. And again, so much of this depends on your own natal chart. So much of this. Do you have anything in the sign of Taurus? Or maybe you do have a lot of energy going through the sign of Scorpio and they're opposing each other. There's so much that could be said just looking at your own natal chart as an individual, but just as a collective here. So Jupiter is going to be going through Taurus for a full year now. And again, kind of making things a bigger deal. So this could be very, very interesting over this next year with Jupiter going through Taurus. It really, really could. Again, especially involving our financial systems, especially when Jupiter gets close to Uranus. That's going to be next year. Might be a little later this year, but regardless, it's Jupiter, all this stuff that I'm talking about, Jupiter's just there making it a bigger deal. But keep in mind that this sign of Taurus is like the sign of consuming food. And Jupiter makes things a bigger deal. So just be very mindful about what you're putting in your body. Nothing wrong with eating, but it's just, I recommend you put good things that nourish your body, because again, Jupiter does rule fat. This is the kind of thing. And again, so much depends on your own natal chart. Some people need to eat more, but it's like with Jupiter ruling fat, and also Jupiter has an influence on our liver as well. But this is like, salty foods, like, things like potato chips. And there's some good potato chips out there, but for the most part, if you're just mowing down a bag of Lay's potato chips with a big old thing of, ranch dip or something like that, that's totally Jupiter in Taurus kind of energy. So we're all going to be experiencing this kind of energy. But on the other side of that, just try to balance everything out, because with all this Taurus energy going through, in fact, anytime the moon's going through the sign of Taurus, it is said that food is to taste better. In fact, the sign of Taurus rules the tongue, really kind of rules basically the whole mouth, rules this whole part of the body. I'll get into that in just a moment here. But our taste buds are going to be a little more sensitive, and this is a good time to enjoy a meal, even though I will say this. Some of you have heard me say this before. So currently right now, I'm making this video on May 14th. Currently right now, the moon is waning. It's getting smaller. We're going towards a new moon. Okay. If you look up in the sky, the moon's going to be a little smaller every night when we're having a waning moon. And when we're doing that, that is when I personally try to just eat a little less, or at least be a little more mindful about what I'm eating. And then by the time the new moon hits, I'm just basically following what's going on up in the sky. When we hit the new moon is when I would generally, eat less. It's a really good time to be doing a fast. And I must say this as well. Some of this can very much change depending on your own natal chart. If you were born on a full moon, things are going to be a little different. If you were born during a waxing moon, it's going to be different than somebody who was born during a waning moon. There's all kinds of little, we get into the nitty gritty of things. But for the most part, it's just, especially for somebody who wants to just be, taking care of their body. And for some people who maybe deal with weight issues, that sort of thing. If you tap into the moon cycles, it's like, it's your own little, the moon is a mother. It's like the mother's looking down on us like, okay, it's the moon's getting smaller. We don't need to be eating as much, that sort of thing. Okay. So again, as the moon is waiting, I'm eating a little less, and then by the way, once the new moon hits and the moon starts to wax, as the moon is starting to get bigger, that's when I tend to eat more. And I'm not super, I don't go too crazy with this. I just pay attention to what I'm doing, and I'm following the moon. But when the moon starts to wax and gets bigger, then, leaning towards the full moon, that's when I tend to eat more. That's when I tend to give more nourishment to my body. You can think about it this way. When the moon is waning, that's a good time to be flushing things out and detoxing, versus when the moon is waxing, that's a good time to be nourishing the body. Okay. And again, we can really, if you are somebody who is really desperately trying to, lose weight, that sort of thing, I can help you with that based on your natal chart and what the moon and the sun were doing when you were born. Okay. But since I went off on that tangent, but because this is a new moon, that basically the night of May 19th for myself over here in California, as the moon's waxing with all this Taurus energy going on, you better believe I'm going to enjoy a good meal. That's like the best time to be paying attention to it. Have a nice, nourishing meal, especially if again, so much as some of this will depend on your location, because for those of you in the UK, this is actually going to be in the evening time. And I personally do not recommend ever eating after 8 o'clock at night. And that's just a super general rule of thumb. It's different During wintertime, it's darker earlier. I guess that depends on where you live, but for the most part, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, during the wintertime, the days are shorter. And so I try to not eat after, say, 7 o'clock at night. During the summertime, when the days are longer and it's lighter for a longer time, then I work with more like 8 o'clock at night. But overall, really, once the sun goes down, that's not a good time to be putting food into our body because the enzymes aren't functioning as well to help digest that food. That's a huge thing. I can't even tell you how important that little rule is. And I know for a lot of people, especially people who like to smoke a lot of weed, and also people who drink a lot of alcohol, notice this too. It's like, 10 o'clock at night and you get the munchies, and that's like the worst time to be eating. So keep that in mind. I'm going off on this food tangent because all this Taurus energy is hitting me right now. But okay, so think about this. If the moon is already starting to wax, if it's after 8:53 a.m. Pacific time, so 11:53 a.m. Eastern time, then the moon is already starting to get bigger. And with all this Taurus energy, it's such a good time to nourish your body with really good food. Your body will love you for it. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, another thing to mention here is this is like all feminine energy. This is wild. The sign of Taurus, well, all the earth signs are feminine signs. All the water signs are feminine signs. The air and fire are masculine signs, okay? So we've got all this Taurus, Venetian, feminine energy going on. And by the way, if you are a dude and you are a Taurus, it doesn't mean that you are feminine, okay? It just doesn't. I've got a lot of fire in my chart. I'm still a feminine person. It just, when somebody's born with way more water and earth in their chart, they tend to have a little more feminine qualities. When somebody's born with way more fire and air in their chart, they tend to have a little more athletic abilities or a little more masculine, that sort of thing. But what we're going to be hit with for this new moon is all this feminine Taurus energy being ruled by Venus. Venus is, the influencer of love. Then we've also got Venus and Mars in the sign of Cancer down here. Cancer's a water sign. It's feminine. Okay. So they're both going through these feminine signs. Sign of Cancer could be a little romantic. It can be, especially while Venus is going through. Let's put it that way. While Venus works well in Cancer. It's not exalted or anything, but I think in Vedic astrology, Venus might be considered exalted. I might be wrong about that, but I just know that they consider, and I do consider also Venus, she's the influencer of love, okay? And what we're attracted to and things that are aesthetically pleasing and things like poetry and beauty. And the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. It's a very feminine energy. Again, if you're a dude and you're a Cancer, I'm not trying to say you're feminine, please understand what I'm trying to say here. It's more just this Venetian energy coming through the sign of Cancer is very romantic. And then Mars rules our sex drive. He's going through this feminine side of Cancer. There's a lot of kind of sensuality going on here. Keep that in mind. Okay. And then we've also got, the South Node down here in the sign of Scorpio. That's a water sign. It's a feminine side. Then we've also got Saturn going through Pisces and Neptune going through Pisces, which Pisces is another water sign, another feminine side. A lot of very feminine energies coming through here. The only thing that we've got that's masculine is Chiron up here in Aries. Aries is a fire sign, so it's masculine. And we've got Pluto, which is now in retrograde, going through the sign of Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign, so it's a masculine sign, okay? And that's Pluto. Pluto's considered like the most generational influencer. It's the one that moves the slowest, so it doesn't have so much of an independent influence on each and every one of us, okay? It does, but in its own little trippy way. Okay, so just lovely energy here we've got going on. Very, very soft energy going on. Might be something that we all need. Okay, now also there's some really nice aspects coming off of this new moon. Okay, so here's the sun and the moon. These green lines, I mean, there's a bunch of them and they're all kind of connecting to different things, but I'd say the big one here is the sun and the moon. There's green lines that are going up here to Neptune. That's a really strong sextile aspect, which is very opportunistic connection. Basically, Neptune going through Pisces, the mystic, the spiritual energy. Neptune rules mysticism. also rules the sign of Pisces. That's what makes Pisces so mystical and spiritual. Okay. So there's this very mystical energy that is making an opportunistic connection with these new moons in the sign of Taurus. Okay. So that's, if you're on this like spiritual journey, think about this, is that you've got the stability coming through the sign of Taurus, which, by the way, because it's a fixed sign, when we set our intentions for a new moon that's in a fixed sign, the energy tends to stay. It tends to fix itself. Okay. It tends to, like when it's a new moon in a mutable sign, things can get a little sidetracked. Okay. But a fixed sign, we've got a really good probability to set the intentions and have them stick. And if you can include some kind of, spiritual practice into that, that's lovely, because that sextile connection up to Neptune. And then we've also got this lovely same kind of connection here, sextile aspect over here to Mars in Cancer. And Mars doesn't do so well in Cancer. I got to be honest here. Plus anaretic degree. Okay. I didn't even think about that. But Mars, because Mars rules our sex drive, our physical drive, Mars is like the one that makes us go do what we got to do. People who have a lot of Mars energy in their natal chart tend to be very masculine, very strong. And the sign of Cancer, it's like the mother of the zodiac. I always think of this. I was born with Mars and Cancer in my chart, and it's like an emotional drive. Okay. So keep that in mind as well, especially when Mars is anaretic. Could be definitely some emotions going on here. Like aggressive emotions, maybe not so much though. Like Mars and Cancer in and of itself could definitely create like aggressive emotions, very protective energy. Including myself, I know almost everybody I've ever given a reading to who's got their Mars in Cancer, there's this need to protect our loved ones in kind of an aggressive way. Okay, so some of us might be getting influenced with that, but also that is making this opportunistic connection. Just Mars in and of itself, just think about Mars, here we go, drive, it's the time to take action, is making this opportunistic connection up with the sun and the moon. And also the sun and the moon will be trining Pluto. So that's nice. Here's Pluto over here. Okay, these blue lines that go from here to here, that means they're harmonizing. The new moon is harmonizing with Pluto, which Pluto, basically what he's just trying to do is create a transformational process within all of us as a collective and as individuals. So the transformational process is harmonizing with these new beginnings. Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Now, also, if you have any questions or if you want me to go deeper into this stuff, please do schedule a reading. I've been getting a lot more clients lately who are just like, oh, I've been watching your stuff on YouTube, and now I want to learn more in depth. And it's so fun to connect with you guys. You guys who want to learn this stuff, I love teaching you guys this stuff so much. Okay, so let's talk about body parts. So the sign of Taurus really does rule basically this area of the body, the lower part of the jaw. I mean, it kind of rules the whole mouth, but really the upper jaw is more Aries territory. The lower jaw, the tongue, the neck, even the vessels in the neck, that's all Taurus energy. Okay, now this part of our body becomes more sensitive when the moon transits through the sign of Taurus. Again, even like our taste buds and stuff. That's why it's a good time to enjoy a good meal. But it's also a time where things it just depends on yourself. It depends on your own natal chart. If you already have a sore throat and we got all this Taurus energy going on, then your throat might become a lot more sore. And it just depends on what's going on in your life. Like generally, I will recommend some kind of an herb to support this part of our body. I will say this, like I was trying to think of something that would be good for kind of everybody overall. And I would say raw honey, preferably local, even more preferably organic, but most importantly, raw honey. Okay. And if you can get it somewhere local to you, that's even better. That's really good for the throat. Also, something called propolis can be really good for the throat. Oh, shoot. What was the other one I was going to mention? Oh, calendula can be really good for the throat. And that's, all these things that for the most part, I'm not a doctor and I don't ever claim to be a doctor or anything like that. But for the most part, these things are kind of good for everybody, maybe with a few exceptions out there. But when it comes to the throat, like some people might have a really dry throat. Some people might have a really mucousy throat. And so it's really hard for me to recommend an herb. I wouldn't want to recommend something that's good for a mucousy throat and somebody with a dry throat that is taking something that's astringent. It's like going to do the opposite of what we would want it to do. So what I wanted to bring up is this book that I have been absolutely addicted to lately. It is called Earthwise Herbal Repertory, and it is by Matthew Wood. Matthew Wood is an excellent herbalist and teacher. But I love the way that this book is set up, especially if you can kind of understand, just even if you don't know the basics of medical astrology, this is still a really, really good book. But if you're somebody who understands just the very basics of medical astrology, and you understand the difference between dry and cold versus dry and hot, or inflamed versus sort of like restricted, this book helps a lot for being able to learn how to heal yourself, for not just, sign of Taurus, for everything. There's no zodiac signs included in this. If you want to get into that, then you got to go to Judith Hill's Academy for Astrological Medicine. I mean, of course, there's other schools out there, but that's my favorite. But that book is really good. I know so many of you are very interested in learning about, healing with plants and that sort of thing, and maybe what's good for just you as an individual. That book is awesome. Okay, so there's that. Now, also gemstones. Okay, so the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Taurus is emerald, which is interesting, because emerald really, especially green emerald, really belongs to Mercury. Okay. And emeralds can be great. They can be so good for trying to have good communication skills, but emeralds are also very, very strong, and they're not necessarily good for everybody. Like if you're super mercurial, meaning like, let's say you've got the sun conjunct Mercury in your natal chart, you might not want to be doing a green emerald. I mean, it just depends on the whole rest of your natal chart, but you might already be, already carrying the essence of that green ray. Okay. Too much of it. Or also if you're an Aquarius rising, which would put basically the two Mercury signs, Gemini and Virgo, in the challenging houses. Okay. And I get some of you guys are going to get this, and some of you are going to be like, what is she talking about? And basically, I'll just say this. If you're an Aquarius rising, generally speaking, a green emerald may not be the perfect stone for you. There might be times in your life will it be really good for you, but overall, it's not necessarily, in my very strong opinion, the best stone for an Aquarius rising to be wearing. And again, if you have a ton of Gemini in your chart, or a ton of Virgo in your chart, you might not want to be carrying around an emerald. But again, that doesn't mean that every single person who's a Gemini, or every single person who's a Virgo, or every single person who's an Aquarius rising shouldn't be wearing an emerald, because there's things that could counteract this. But that's a very good general rule of thumb to just keep in mind, especially if you're really trying to finely tune what kind of gemstones you're wearing on your body. But overall, green emerald is a wonderful stone. It's interesting because it can help with communication, but it can also, for some people, it can kind of calm the nerves. And for other people, it can kind of stimulate the nerves. It also depends on, again, what else is going on in your chart and your transits and your environment and all sorts of things. But it is a very, very powerful stone. So just be mindful of that. If you happen to have a green emerald, maybe don't wear it on your body, at anytime really, unless you know for sure it's good for you. But specifically, when we're receiving already this emerald type of energy, I always take the gemstones. I mean, obviously I know which gemstones are good for my body and which ones aren't, but I have a lot of gemstones that don't necessarily, I would not be a complement for my vessel. So I take them and I put them on top of my journal. After I write in my journal what it is I'm trying to manifest, and I include the sign that the moon is transiting through, the house that it's coming through in my natal chart, write down what I'm trying to manifest. Okay. And then I take those gemstones and I put them on top of my journal, and I put that journal on a windowsill. I always try and do this in the hours leading up to the new moon. If you're a day late or a couple hours late or whatever, it's better than nothing. Okay. And also if you want to do it a couple days earlier, then that's fine too. I'm just saying I have the best results from doing it in hours leading up to the new moon. Okay, so there's the emerald. Now, also keep in mind something like malachite, which is a green stone. Okay, this is kind of a Mercury type of energy. Malachite is a really good stone for pretty much everybody. Okay, it's one of the #1 recommended stones from Edgar Cayce. But some stones that are more like for everybody and really, really resonate well with the sign of Taurus, I'm going to start with rose quartz. Okay. Rose quartz is lovely. The only people I would say maybe you don't want rose quartz is if you've got like you're overly feminine and soft and can't really pick up your, you're really sluggish in life and that sort of thing, rose quartz might make even more. But anybody who's going through like a hard time emotionally, rose quartz can be really nice. It's like this soft pink color. Okay, so I was going to show you guys these. So these are both like massage tools, okay, that are made out of rose quartz. As I mentioned, this sign of Taurus rules this part of the body, and being able to take the rose quartz and rub that part of the body while the moon's transiting through the sign of Taurus is absolutely lovely. And you can buy these online. This was from a store. But absolutely love the stone. But again, you just take the rose quartz and put it on top of your journal. Okay, now another one I was going to mention is, oh boy, where is it? What was I going to do with it? This one right here. I'll go to this one next. There was something else I was going to, citrine. I was going to mention citrine. Let me mention citrine first. All right, first of all, I have my little citrine stone on here. Citrine is really, really nice. Citrine is not necessarily the most extravagant or powerful stone, but it's really good for manifesting financial abundance, amongst other things. It can also help to bring clarity and all sorts of things, but it's kind of a good stone that's specifically good for manifesting or money into your life. This is just a little piece here. It's super affordable. I've also got, it comes in all different shapes and sizes and all sorts of things. This is a piece here. It's pretty dusty. I think I need to dust it, but that's a piece of citrine right there. Citrine also resonates very well with the sign of Taurus. And then this one, I was going to mention this too, black kyanite. Okay, black kyanite resonates very well with the sign of Taurus, and this one's a little more protective. Okay, citrine is not necessarily a very protective stone. In some cases, it can also be cleansing. Rose quartz is sort of protective in certain ways, but the black kyanite, and really any of the darker stones, you guys know how much I love the black tourmaline, malachite, not malachite, this one is, geez, it's slipping my mind right now, hematite. Like the darker stones are very protective, but this one, black kyanite, is not only very protective, but it also very specifically resonates well with the sign of Taurus. So I will be taking citrine, rose quartz, and the black kyanite, putting it on top of my journal after I write in it in the hours leading up to this new moon. Okay, I think I covered everything. I think I said everything I wanted to say. If you'd like to schedule an astrology reading, please visit my website, erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. If you are on a phone or a tablet, look for the menu bar, which is just 3 little small lines at the top. When you click there, it'll say book online. Super easy from there. Okay, so I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.